Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Naked Blacksmith, the series where I set up a lovely little blacksmith's workshop in a corner of my shed on a limited budget, starting with no clues and no gear. In this series I'm going to be handling simple little projects and showing you how a novice blacksmith picks up the skills really quickly. The tricks and skills that I've picked up over the last few weeks are really going to help you forge ahead. See what I did there? They're really going to help you forge ahead with your forging. I've made the mistakes so that you don't have to. In this video, I'm going to be using my newly made twisting wrench to make this beautiful scroll handle for one of my stoves. Stay watching till the end and I'll show you exactly how I made that twisting wrench.
This handle that I'm making could be used for any number of things. It could be a handle for a cooking utensil, it could be a handle for a poker perhaps, or in this case it's going to be the handle for one of my bespoke little wood stoves. I'm using 10mm square, which is 3/8, but it could be 1/2 inch. What I'm doing here is putting a light groove down each face of the portion that I'm going to twist. It's a decorative thing, you'll see how it comes out soon. The two ends will be left unscrolled and ungrooved. I'm using a 1mm cutting disc to cut a slit about 1mm deep. Could be more, could be less. It all depends on your personal preference. It's the first one of these I've done, so I don't know how it's going to come out. I'm just doing what feels right. I've found that with blacksmithing, a lot of what feels right is what is right. So there we have it. That's 4 1mm wide, 1mm deep grooves on each side. Now I'm going to fire up the forge and we'll heat up each end independently. First I'll work on one end of it, then I'll turn it around and work on the other. I'm going to draw them down into a long taper, starting off with the rounding hammer on the beak of the anvil, turning it by 90 degrees every few hits to maintain the dimensions. When you start using the rounding hammer to move metal, at first nothing seems to be happening except bruising, and then all of a sudden you see a taper starting to develop, and before you know it you've got a lovely fine drawn out taper that can be finished off with the flat side of the hammer on the main face of the anvil. Now that I have that first taper roughed out, it's time to turn the hammer over and move on to the face of the anvil, and I'm going to start plenishing out those bumps and ripples and making it nice and smooth on all four sides and trying to keep the taper central. I've only done a handful of these. I've only been blacksmithing for a few weeks. A lot of the time I've spent making my first tools. This decorative work is still quite new to me. You need the steel nice and orange, bright orange to a bright red for moving the metal, but when you come to plenishing and smoothing it out, that can be done with what they call black heat. So do all your moving of metal at the beginning of the heat, and then as it starts to cool down, you can turn the hammer over, and if you're at that stage of where you've got it, you can start smoothing out the finish, as I am here. Now that I've got the taper how I want it, it's time to start putting in the first scroll. That's done right on the tip of the beak of the anvil, just to get you started. Once you've gone round as far as you can on the beak, transfer up onto the face of the anvil and knock that over further into a tight curl. Then you can start forming the rest of the scroll. You should be able to do a whole scroll in one heat, but I'm not at that stage yet. It takes me about 2 heats, sometimes 3. I've knocked the centre eye out of shape here. I'll have to put a pritchel through that hole later and just give it a tidy up, I think. Because I've got 2 scrolls on the same item, I'm going to take care to make sure that they both look similar, if not exactly the same. I've just done the central part of the scroll, and I'll start tapering down the other end now. Once I've tapered this end down and started the other scroll, I can then adjust the 2 scrolls so that they're symmetrical. And here we go with the second scroll on the end. This one is done in the opposite direction, just to provide some balance for the handle to make it look right. That's the great thing with blacksmithing. So much of it is artistic and isn't actually incredibly important which way the things are done, so long as it looks nice. So I've now got 2 half-finished scrolls. I'll tidy up the centre portions on both of them, and then I can finish the scrolls, and just as I work round, compare them to one another and make sure that they both come out the same. The constant wire brushing that you're watching me do keeps everything clean. If you don't regularly wire brush your part after it comes out of the forge, you will get a scale build up, and when that scale sits on the anvil and you keep beating, you're driving that scale back into the hot surface of the metal, and that means it gets ugly. So every time you see scale, wire brush it off, and then you can get on with making a beautiful article that will need far less cleaning up when you've finished. As you become proficient on the anvil, you'll find several different ways of achieving the same or subtly different effects. For example, I've been rolling this around by holding it down on the anvil. Now I'm going to use the cold end on the anvil which won't move, so that I can get a good driving force straight down onto the eye that I'm trying to adjust. The bottom one won't bend while it's still cold. The top one's going to bend a lot easier. What I'm doing is looking at both of the eyes, trying to make sure that they're symmetrical, keeping them flat as I go. You'll notice I changed hammers earlier on. Now that I've finished the moving of the metal and the smoothing of the metal, I'm using a 2-pound hammer instead of the 3-pound hammer, just because it's a little bit more manoeuvrable. Now I'm heating up the middle of the handle, because this is the exciting part. We're gonna give it the decorative twist. So I'm holding it in the vise just below where those grooves that I ground finished, and then I'm going to hold it with the twisting wrench just above the other end, and I'm going to give it one full turn. See how easy this is with a good twisting wrench? There we are, done. Of course, putting those kind of forces on a piece of metal really brings out the flaking scale on the surface, so a really good wire brush now to finish off. And as the colour runs out of it and it comes down to a black heat, it's time to give it a coating of beeswax and canola oil. That's a mix that I use for a great number of purposes, but I've also found that now that I'm blacksmithing, it's a really nice finish for the work I've done. Right, so that's 2 applications of beeswax, and now I'll weld a little piece to the back and put the finished article on the stove that I'm making. The twisting wrench is one of those tools that really starts to make your beating and bashing of molten metal look like artwork. It's dead easy to make. You can make a fixed twisting wrench from forged or welded steel, but an adjustable twisting wrench, in my opinion, is the way to go. What you need is a really strong adjustable box spanner, something with square jaws. I've chosen this really old F wrench, I think they were called, and I've welded a stout handle to the end of it. My handle's made of 1.25 inch, which is about the same dimensions as the handle itself. It's important to have the added on piece the same length as the wrench itself, so that you get a nice even twist. Took me 5 minutes to make, and it's really going to bring my stuff to life. Now, like many of you, I'm a raw beginner, and there's a lot that I don't know about blacksmithing. But thanks to YouTube and some very, very helpful people, yes, Greg from the California Blacksmiths Association, I'm talking about you. I've got my own pet blacksmithing tutor who sends me an email every couple of weeks after watching my videos and tells me where I've been going wrong. So come on, get into it. Make yourself a twisting wrench.